What's up, gamers? Metallic Rock here, and I haven't done a video in a while, haven't been doing weekly vaults, haven't even really been doing weekly keys, and with 10.2 announced and PTR cycles in place, it's on the way. Season 2 is kinda done for me. You know, I'm trying to gear up a Monk. I'll probably play Monk Season 3, maybe I'll talk about that soon. But, I kinda wanted to just give like a final look over the Season 2's dungeons and kind of just see how they turned out. So let's just get started with that. I just found this somebody else had already made, which is perfect. It doesn't have the names on it, but Neltharian's Lair, Legacy of Tyr, Halls of Infusion, Freehold, Brackenhide, Underrot, and Vortex Pinnacle. And right off the bat, I'm just going to start with an obvious one. Freehold. Freehold it's S tier. It's just really fun. You know, there's nothing like those. Everybody knew that Freehold was going to be a top tier dungeon, and it remained the same. It had like a couple crazy issues and like higher tyrannical keys with like Sky Captain Crag just absolutely nuking people if he shot the same person twice. And then, I mean, there was a couple other things, but it was Freehold. It was Freehold. They didn't really change too much for BFA. They got rid of the Council of Captains RP. I don't know. It was kind of nice. I didn't mind the Council of Captains RP, but I didn't play at the same level that I do now. I could definitely see that getting tiring. The higher key you do. That was an obvious one. Let's just do the other BFA one, and that was Underrot. Underrot, to me, was like fine in BFA. It was a scary key because of pugs, but I actually didn't really mind the mechanics. People couldn't do spores, people couldn't kill ticks on Krog, and that kind of remained the same. In my groups, in my experience, less with Xantia and the spores. People actually did pretty good for upheaval overall in my keys this season, which I think is way lower than the amount of keys I do in another season, you know, Season 1 of Dragonflight, Season 4, and probably even Season 3 of Shadowlands. I probably have done less keys this season than those seasons. But for me, Underrot, it was easy. They changed a couple polls. They removed the like need to do some skips. They added some worms in spots so that you couldn't do some skips. It was very linear. That's going to be a common theme we see with these dungeons. That's actually, for me, overall, holistically on the season, a downgrade compared to Season 1, which had its own share of issues. But for me, I think Underrot's somewhere around a low A or a high B. It's fine. It's straightforward. The bosses are pretty good. The trash is like, there's not a lot of damage you're forced to take. Not that I can think of. And it ended up fine. Next I'm actually going to do Halls of Infusion. We could do a Legion dungeon here, but I'm going to do Halls of Infusion. Because Halls of Infusion actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. I thought doing it on PTR, because I actually played PTR to test out like the tank tier sets for season 2, and doing Halls of Infusion in PTR was a nightmare. And it kind of, there were parts of it that were really bad still up until was it the 10.1.5 or 0.7 when they did the dungeon nerf pass after Augment Evoker came out, I think, and they like nerfed the dragons and some things like that. The third boss had an insane HPS check like throughout the whole season. But I actually was never that upset to be in Halls of Infusion. I thought, once again, very linear, no choices really. You pull what's in front of you, that's it. So that's going to be the case with almost all of these. And I actually really liked Halls of Infusion. The only parts of Halls of Infusion that I thought really suffered, and it never changed, was the gauntlet at the end. I thought the gauntlet was terrible. The hitbox on the swirlies were so weird, how you could stand on the pillar and the swirly's visual box would pass through you, but not the hitbox if you were close enough to the pillar. And then they added mobs that couldn't be stunned that did a AoE circle stun below them. So you're standing with like your back to the pillar, if you're the tank and I'm tanking against the pillar. I'm standing with my back to the pillar so the swirlies don't hit me, and then I'm having to dodge blindly out of the, I don't know. The gauntlet part was terrible, man. And the dragons did so much damage. Not that it really mattered after a little bit, like when I started to get my guardian geared, it didn't really matter. You just heal through everything after the rework. That was 10.1.5. For me, Halls of Infusion, I thought it was gonna be like D tier, the worst dungeon. I never want to do it, but I think it was a B tier dungeon. I think it was a B tier dungeon. Some other things that take it down for me was like, some stuff felt a little buggy. There was a little bit of bugginess for me with the last boss. And I did not like, they fixed it, they changed it, the way the bubbles moved. The bubbles moved on that last boss, they were so chaotic. Sometimes as the tank, they would just come through the boss and all of a sudden you had waterlogged and you were gonna be dead in 3 seconds. And they changed that to be if you were in the bubble, you're taking damage, not that the waterlogged dot does the damage, and that was a good change. Post that change, there's not that much I would complain about besides the gauntlet. Next, I guess I'll do Vortex Pinnacle. Vortex Pinnacle, the first kata dungeon. So it proves that they're willing to do kata dungeons for Mythic Plus seasons. It's also very linear, but it's got actually some pretty big trash pulls. And it has one trash pull. I mean, the worst pull of the season, in my opinion, not by difficulty, but by design. Oh my god. The first pull, which is typically the double pull with the big wind guardians that do the AoE swirly that knocks you up in the air in melee. That was the worst thing ever. And you typically pulled the first one with the 2 on the bridge, and they do a deflect shield. I don't know, it's not a deflect, but an absorption shield, directional, that you can't control, that points at random players. Oh my god. And you're lusting it because you just want to get through it so fast because it's the worst. But like half the time, your ranged have to move to hit it anyway, and your melee are running out. What a terrible pull. Other than that, I actually liked it. I thought it was fine. To me, as a tank, the bosses were cool. I didn't really care. Altruist was fun. Free haste, basically free lust at all times if you play it right. You could also do a lot of weird, wacky things, like not ever go up as a DK by just AMSing it. That was pretty fun. And yeah, no, good dungeon. I think Vortex Pinnacle was also a B. There were things that I didn't like. I think it's a high B. There were things that I didn't like. There were things that I did. And I didn't really have an opinion going into it like I did with Halls of Infusion, where I thought it would be bad and it turned out a lot better. I kind of just, I mean, it was old and I kind of figured they would have to rework a bunch, and they did, and it turned out good to me. I was never that upset to see a VP either. Let's talk about a dungeon that I was kind of upset to see. Legacy of Tyr, right? Legacy of Tyr, I did not like. I did not like Legacy of Tyr. And I know I've just said that 3 times, but I'm trying to make sure you understand. It's not necessarily that there was... It's super long, okay? It's super long, and it's not just long because there's 5 bosses. It's just a long dungeon, like travel distance, and you're going from pole to pole, and you've got... There was a lot of weird trash. There was the golem that does earthquake that just railed me as the tank. I was just getting railed. I mean, instantly on pole, popping everything just to live at the beginning of the season. That was crazy. I don't hate. I like when routes are switchable and when there's choice, and there wasn't really in this dungeon, except for what became typical, at least in Tyrannical Week's tradition, of pulling the second boss first and lusting him the Trog, and then going back. And there was some little optimization stuff with that too, like pulling the Trog boss with the first 2, the 2 big Trogs in front of him, so that he got a damage taken increase on him. I think that was good. Being able to stun the 3rd boss, a boss that CC's worked against, that's a cool design. The last boss was always kind of a nightmare to me. The Fire Golem boss was not very memorable. He was fine. He was not memorable, yeah. There was the thunderclap mobs that you had to LOS. Those were fine. It didn't wow me, and I was never being excited to see it when I got a legacy tier. It was always like, this is gonna take forever. And I know as healers, like, healers were sweating immensely in that dungeon. The last boss, with if you didn't have a coordinated group that could just mass dispel the magic off, or the third boss with the bleed, there was some insane healer stuff that they had to do in there, and I don't think it was very good. I don't want to see this again. If we do bring Dragonflight dungeons back, I hope we don't bring this one back. I have a feeling that Season 4 is going to be all Dragonflight dungeons, by the way. Maybe even with the Mega Dungeon, Galakron, Sval, and Marizan's Rise. I could see a 10 dungeon season. They've done it before. Let's talk about the gimmick dungeon for a second. Now, Theris was the gimmick dungeon of the season. We've had gimmick dungeons in the past, like Necrotic Wake with the weapons, and here we had the chains, the Neltheris burning chains, and they were terrible in the beginning of the season. I don't know if you can remember this far back, if you've even played enough of this season to know or realize, these used to just kill you when you used them. I mean, it really kind of only felt that bubbling paladins or the tank could use this, and everybody else had to just leave. There was like, because I'm a little bit of a prankster, a little bit of a gamer, I would grab the chain and try to drag it over my teammates, and also the mobs. I mean, I was tanking. The mobs are on me, don't worry about it. And blow everybody up, because it was hilarious. That was such a weird thing, that you were punished for using the gimmick. For, like, what reason? It didn't make sense, and they changed it. They changed it to not do damage to you or your allies when you use the chains, and it was great after that. It was still hard to pull off, like, really highly coordinated things, depending on the week. But, just the sight of seeing, like, 30 Spitefuls pop out of nowhere as you chains a whole pack, that was cool. And the chains being on the right side going into the second boss, if you do the Mag Mammoth first, that was great, because it meant that you had CDs going into the second boss. You didn't have to blow them all on trash. You would just save CDs, use chains, fight the boss, and then use chains again. So I actually really liked the gimmick in this dungeon. And I think besides that, it was fine. Super long, super punishing if people died, because you basically had to stop to res. There was never any shortcuts. If you died after the second boss, it was very long for them to get back, even with a little shortcut. And yeah, it was just a lot of dungeons suffered from this, by the way. Halls of Infusion, actually, now that I think about it, Halls of Infusion might be a lower B than I gave it credit for, because both of these dungeons, Vortex Pinnacle and Halls of Infusion, had a speed mechanic if you died and had to get back. Now, Vortex Pinnacle was a lot better because you had the Cyclones on the left and right to get to whichever boss you had just killed, and that helps a lot. But when it comes to Halls of Infusion, they give you the speed buff after you would have wanted it, which was just give me the speed buff when I spawn in. Don't make me run to get the speed buff. Just give me the speed buff. That's crazy. So that was a huge issue, and it remains an issue in Neltheris. Now, they did give you, like, the goulash, like, right before you went upstairs to speed yourself through. Super long dungeons, super punishing if you die on time, because you had to stop and res, and, you know, heaven save you if it was actually Spiteful week, because then you have to kill the Spitefuls to do the res. So, besides that, the bosses were bugged out as hell. And I guess it wasn't bugged out because they left it in. The second boss, if anybody died with the chain on them, they just bugged out. And in any real meaningful key, it was a wipe. But in lower keys, you just had to suffer through it and to eat the damage. And that was crazy. Just leave the spear on the ground. I guess it was some kind of technical limitation they couldn't solve. The first boss, the Mag Mammoth, had this weird, like, snapping thing that it would do sometimes that was crazy, so it couldn't tell who it was targeting. Then you had the last boss, who went through a bunch of changes. They slowed down his swirlies in his raging shield phase. They made it so that the curse only went up to 1 stack and you didn't have to dispel it. It didn't matter. They just made it not matter. You could have removed the curse from the game and it wouldn't have been a mechanic. It would have been the same amount of a mechanic as it was in the game. So there was a lot of, I think, boss design failures here, as well as bugs that they just left in. For me, that puts this dungeon at like a C. It puts it at a C, even though like the design of the dungeon I thought was fine, and the actual encounters themselves never really bothered me that much. The bugs and I just never was that happy to get Neltharis, and I've actually done Neltharis a lot. That might be one of my most done keys. From Neltharis to Neltharian's Lair, this is one that was like really kind of wacky in the beginning. The worm boss was like super overtuned before it got changed. Healers were just full sweating, but ended up being cool. I actually ended up liking this one. And I played Druid, so I could be mounted in this one, as well as Vortex Pinnacle. And that was great. That was awesome. Play Druid, I guess, is some advice. For me, the bosses were fine. I didn't get to do these in Legion, so that was cool. It was cool to experience these. I don't know what they really changed from Legion to Dragonflight, but there was some choice on what you pulled. The pelters were crazy. The pelters would sometimes just nuke people. Healers had to be on their A game, but I mean, as a tank, that wasn't really my problem. There wasn't any like super crazy big pulls except like right before the worm. You could pull like everything into that right before the worm, and that was pretty fun. But I'd say overall for me, it was around a B. It was a B. It was fine. It was good. Brackenhide was one that people were like super worried about, and let's be fair, it did have issues. The last boss particularly is like the worst kind of boss. It's like the worst kind of boss where you're funneling all your damage into the totems, but the totems don't do damage to the boss. So like you have to. People just don't like doing damage that quote unquote doesn't matter, but you have to address or it will kill you. I think a better change would have been killing a totem does a portion of the boss's health, or the boss's health is partially linked to the totem, so that way you hitting the totem did some damage to the boss, and people would have liked that a whole lot more, I feel. There's also some weird stuff. You could skip Stink Breath. There was some skips in here. There was different things you could do towards the end, towards the beginning. It had choices. Priests could just get all the cages by themselves, because priests were OP this entire season. This dungeon was very open, which is good, in my opinion, by design, to have some open dungeons, and you have the more crampy dungeons, like Legacy of Tyr, and Neltharis was even pretty cramped in. Brackenhide, I think people would agree, was like a surprise good dungeon. The trash really didn't ever bother me. The hunters were kind of wacky. You didn't really want to pull hunters if you could avoid it. I'd say like the right side that you go up after the first boss was fine, unmemorable. You're mostly just like killing totems and then like burning through trash. It was fine. There wasn't too much going on, at least that I ever had to worry about. Yeah, Brackenhide. The third boss was kind of weird, I feel. That was a super unmemorable boss for me. I don't even know what her name is. The hunt leader. They always get the voice line about the hunt leader when she dies. She was fine. It was basically nothing. It was basically hit the boss and then it dies. You like had to run the hyenas through the traps, but in that way it was like similar to the shark Trollthak the Shark Puncher in Freehold, but it was just less memorable than Trollthak. And besides the hyenas, she does a little knockback on the tank, and that's it. If you're not standing directly in front of a trap, you won't get knocked back into it. So I liked the first boss. I liked the second boss. That was cool. I actually think that Brackenhide for me goes also in an A tier. I think that Brackenhide was a good dungeon. Brackenhide is one that I was always pretty happy to run, and there was actually a good tank trinket out of there if you needed that. if you needed a Tree Mouse Splinter, remained a pretty good trinket for tanks that needed an extra defensiveness. And I did run that on things like my Blood DK when I was first gearing it up. I had that for quite a while. I think I ended up getting it on a Demon Hunter, which obviously is good to have because Demon Hunters fall over at the beginning of pulls if you're not ready. And yeah, so I think this is what I'm happy with. For the most part, this list kind of is like how happy was I to get the key, right? If I got a Freehold, I was pretty happy. If I got like a Brackenhide or an Underrot, pretty happy. These, you know, this one's a little higher actually than I would have expected. I thought I would have been a lot more annoyed to get this key. Or even this key maybe, because you never really know how those old dungeons are going to convert. And these were the dungeons I was least happy to get. So, that's what I feel about Dragonflight Season 2. It felt like it died pretty early as far as a WoW season goes. And I actually think there's a lot of reasons behind that I think we can talk about at a later point that I don't want to get into right now. But I actually don't think it's all Blizzard's fault. So hopefully in another video we could talk about that. Thank you for watching. Tell me what dungeon was your favorite. What key were you most excited to get and what key were you least excited to get? That's it for me today. Peace out. Stay wet.